All right, we're going to get started. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We're very excited to have you here, and we're grateful that you took the time out of your busy lives to come and learn a little bit from the two of us. We are going to talk about how to never compete on price, the proven formula to differentiate your practice and protect your profits. Price really is only an issue in the absence of value. That is the huge takeaway for our presentation tonight. But let's talk about value. What are our consumers valuing? Well, they want the best treatment solution, but we know that the market is confusing, especially now, and it's going to only get more confusing as OTC comes out. We know that our patients want a good value relative to their outcomes, but they're unsure of our ability to achieve the outcomes for them. And we know that they want experienced, qualified, trustworthy experts in us, but they assume that this is actually most providers. They don't know how we're going to stand apart on that front. And then there are some consumers who really do only value price, where that's their only concern, but that's the minority of the consumers out there. And that's not the ideal market that we're going to focus on. So our job as providers is to clarify the path to effective treatment for our patients, to clearly and professionally demonstrate the value that we offer them, and to develop a strong relationship as their trusted advisors and experts. So with that, I would like to start by introducing ourselves. I'm going to kick it over to Brad.
Cool. Thanks, Dusty. So I'm Dr. Brad Stewart. I'm an audiologist. I am a private practice owner. I have a couple of practice locations in the Dallas market. And I started my practice as a new start practice in 2014. And within a few years, we built it up to a 7-figure business. And a lot of what I've tried to do since starting my practice is get myself out of the day-to-day work so that I could run it as a business. And so I currently work just a couple of clinic days and my team at my office handles most of the heavy lifting. In the meantime, as I've been building my business and creating systems, I've created programs that other audiologists and practice owners can use inside of their own practice. I feel like one of the biggest things when we go into business for ourselves, we have this idea of creating freedom for ourselves. And in many cases, we actually end up doing the opposite and becoming trapped inside of our businesses. And I've experienced that personally, wasn't a fan, and want to help other practice owners make sure they don't have that same thing happen to them.
And hi, everybody. I am Dr. Dusty Jessen, and I have a practice called Columbine Hearing Care. It is south of Denver, Colorado, in Littleton. We're a suburb of Denver. And my goal is to leverage my clinical hours by systematizing and automating our practice operations. And we'll get into that a little bit more. Aside from my private practice, I'm also the author of 5 Keys to Communication Success, a book that came out in 2013 and now I'm so grateful for, is being used all around the world as a patient education tool. And I'm the creator of the 5 Keys Communication Oral Rehab Program, which we'll talk a little bit about. I'm also the mom of 2 teenage boys and the foster mom of countless foster dogs. I have passions in my life outside of the clinical practice, just like Brad mentioned. And so I really try to follow proven systems and maintain a simple business structure in order to achieve that healthy work-life balance. So what are Brad and I doing here together to talk to you? Well, Brad and I met in 2018 when we went on a retreat of sorts in Costa Rica. There were only 8 audiologists that answered the call to go on this very unique audiology business building retreat. And we had the opportunity to do some really crazy things. This was a picture of us after we had just gotten done zip lining. And it was crazy. We had to step out of our comfort zones a little bit in this experience, but it was mostly fun. We did some other weird things, I would say, on this retreat that forced us to get out of our professional comfort zones as well. One of them was called hot seats. And so in our hot seats, we each took turns expressing challenges that we had in our practices and goals that we had for our practices. And we got very real about this. And some interesting things came out of it. And what we learned about each other was that we both had goals for our practices to streamline the way that our operations happen and systems that could be used. And so in chatting with each other and some of the other participants and the facilitators at this event, we also, having gotten out of our comfort zones and kind of thinking outside of the box, we started really formulating ideas on how we can change our practices and then share those systems with our industry to make things easier for everybody. So we're going to share some of those with you today.
Cool. Yeah, I would say that those Costa Rica trips were some of the more transformative things in my business. And what Dusty didn't tell you is one of the uncomfortable exercises we did, I actually have eye gazed with Dusty's husband for extended periods of time. So that's a unique bond that most people don't get to have.
True.
So let's start off and talk from a high level 30,000 foot view about what do we do to create experiences and brand identity moments that are so unique and impactful for our patients that they become less price sensitive and they really just want to work with us. So how do we connect with prospects? That's a start. Like before somebody comes into our clinic, how do we start to build that trust? How do we convert prospects to patients and offset price sensitivity so that when we're in that hearing aid evaluation appointment, price isn't the main topic of conversation. It's just one of the logistical issues that we have to manage. And then how do we keep our patients satisfied and engaged long-term? How do we fulfill on the commitments that we've made to them so that we see more reviews, referrals, and repurchases? Because ultimately, those current patients inside of our practice are some of the most valuable advocates that we potentially have. And we need to make sure that we are giving them the opportunity to share that experience that they've had with our practice with their friends and family. So I think that it's helpful to step back and look at the entire patient experience and really think about how all of the different moments in a patient experience coalesce into this high level patient experience machine that we can create with our business. And a lot of this stuff that Dusty and I will be talking about are things that we can automate so that we're not relying on managing our staff to make sure that it gets done. We're not relying on us as the owners doing the work. We can use systems and tools to make sure these things happen on autopilot, or we can train our staff to do some of these things. So it all starts off with how our patients find us, how our prospects find us, which could be marketing, promotions, search engine optimization, Google reviews, referral programs, all of these things, physician referrals, all these things are going to drive leads and traffic into our practice. Between the time they come into our practice and between the time they find out about us and the time they come into our practice, that's another good opportunity to start building trust. So we're going to talk a little bit about pre-appointment marketing. But then once we get a patient into our clinic, it is crucially important that we have that one opportunity to make a great first impression. And so we want to make sure we do an amazing job of making that consultation a total wow moment, an experience that's memorable, that's life-changing. And the cool thing about the work we do is we have the opportunity to truly change somebody's life over the course of one appointment. We need to make sure we're really intentional about doing that. After they move forward, then we need to make sure that our treatment experience is just top tier. Best practices should be everyone, no brainer. That shouldn't even be a conversation at this point. Our staff needs to be professional and friendly. Our office needs to look good. It needs to feel comfortable to be in. All of these things affect the patient when they're there, so they have excellent outcomes. After they're in the clinic, because data shows that patients only spend about 2 hours a year in our clinic. So even though those 2 hours may be stellar, that's the entire rest of the year that they're not engaging with our practice, right? So we need to have a structured communication and follow-up program. 5 Keys is part of that. The work that I've done with our marketing automation is part of that. So we're going to talk about how to do that. Inside of that, we should be looking at referral programs, ambassador programs, review generation, patient events, and database efforts, which are going to lead to things like repeat purchases, referrals, and Google reviews, which are all critical to continuing to drive the flywheel to make our practice grow and be successful. So let's start by talking a little bit about what happens before a patient gets into our clinic. Now, online is not the only way that people find out about us, but almost with very few exceptions, I'll say, even if somebody's referred by a physician or find us through their insurance company, they're probably going to go to your website or they're probably going to Google you. And we want to make sure that that brand experience is memorable and makes them excited to work with us rather than feeling hesitant to work with us. First thing we need to do is identify what the things about our practice are that are unique. So in my practice, we talk a lot about brain retraining. We talk a lot about our auditory rehabilitation program with a focus on retraining the brain to hear properly. But maybe for you, it might be something different. Maybe you're a really stellar tinnitus provider. Maybe you specialize in working with musicians, or you see kids, or there's all kinds of things that are unique about our practice. We need to refine the way that we talk about those things so that patients get it, right? So it needs to be taken out of a clinical context and into could I explain this to a fifth grader context? And then that messaging needs to be everywhere. So it needs to be consistently in your mailers, in your website, in your emails, then in your clinic, and then in your ongoing messaging. It needs to be a consistent brand experience. Google reviews are huge. That's one of the biggest ways that people find practices if they weren't referred by another source. They're going to go on the internet and they're going to look for an audiologist near them or a hearing aid provider near them. And if you don't show up at the top of the Google review map pack, you're probably out of the running for the people that they're going to call. Once they get to the website, it needs to be really well built. It needs to have good search engine optimization, fast page speed, which means it loads quickly, powerful calls to action, meaning that we have very intentional sections inside of our website that are designed to get the patient to do something, to ask us for something, to connect with us in some way, whether that's asking for an appointment, downloading a free guide, whatever the case might be. That gives us the opportunity to connect with these prospects. My website was designed by my co-founders, Chris and Stephanie Erickson, and I think they did a stellar job. So if you want to see a good example of that, clearlifehearing.com, I think, is a good starting point so you can get some ideas. And then another big one for me is using video with you and your staff to answer common questions. Patients ask us the same like 20 to 40 questions over and over again. And you could literally sit down and make a list of your 25 most frequent questions, and you're going to know exactly what you say to each of those questions. Like you could recite it in your sleep, record a video, and put it on the page on your website that's relevant to that question. And it's amazing because the cool thing that happens is when people Google those questions, your videos start popping up. When people go to your website and they look at your tinnitus page, they see how you treat tinnitus. So, and read the book They Ask You Answer, because it talks a lot more about this. It also talks about getting comfortable in front of the camera. So these, when we're talking about online experience, these are some of the really high level highlights that I think everyone should be doing at this point. Otherwise, we're going to start falling behind. So now, once somebody reaches out to your practice and they schedule an appointment, this is, I feel like, one of the most underutilized opportunities to market your practice, because they have said yes, they've raised their hand and said they want to come into your clinic for an appointment. So, and we have their contact information, we have their email, we have their address. So let's start teaching them who we are, what makes us different. Let's start sending encouraging messages about success stories that we've had with other people with common types of listening problems or hearing problems. So in our practice, every time somebody schedules a consultation, they get dropped into an automated email series where they get, 5 emails from me in the 2 weeks leading up to their consultation appointment. And by the time they get into my office, they know who I am. I walk in the lobby, they're like, "Oh, hey, Dr. Brad," and I've never met him before. And it goes a long way to build trust and rapport before they ever come into the clinic. And then another good kind of trick is just to have your providers, you or your providers, just send a quick video message, just like, hey, I'm Dr. Brad Stewart. I saw that you scheduled a consultation with me next Thursday, and I'm super excited to meet you. I saw that you're having some trouble hearing in noise, and that's totally in my wheelhouse, so you're in the right place. Send them that video. And that's like, so it's such an easy thing to do, but it's so impactful to the prospect. And again, doing these little small things, once they get into your clinic, it's lowering price sensitivity, because for most people, price is the only metric that they have to compare providers on. But if you create this amazing personalized experience, they're going to be a lot more hesitant to run to Costco after they have that experience. So now let's talk a little bit about the consultation. This is something that my company, Audflow, we've really spent a lot of time thinking about and systematizing. In my experience, there are really 3 keys to converting prospects into patients during a hearing aid consultation. And a lot of it comes down to how prepared we are before that consultation happens. So this is for you if you're a single provider office, and especially for you if you're a multi-provider office, because provider to provider consistency can be such a problem. So with your consultation, you need to have a proven scripting strategy. Like, you need scripts. You need scripts for your objections. You need scripts for your consultation, and you need to have rehearsed it. You need a structured appointment presentation. So I know a lot of experienced providers, I was guilty of this. We just kind of wing it because we've done it for so long that you can, right? And you can get away with it. But even as an experienced provider, we miss things. We miss opportunities to connect with the patient and to ask them probing questions to get a better understanding of what's going on. So by having a structured presentation that we do every time with every person, we know that we're hitting all of those important moments throughout the consultation. And then finally, training and tracking. Like, you can't manage what you don't measure. And I'm always baffled by how many practices with multiple providers never record their consultations. They don't do staff training. They don't do role play. They don't even track their KPIs. These are like fundamental things that we just have to be like, maybe we could get away with it in the old world of the audiology marketplace, but we're not going to be able to get away with it going forward. So let's talk a little bit about building trust and establishing authority, because ultimately, if we're going to be helping someone come to a treatment decision during a consultation process appointment, say it's a 60 or a 90-minute appointment, we have to really effectively build their trust in us and establish that we know how to guide them and that we're on their team, right? And I think the biggest mistake that people make, audiologists and hearing instrument specialists make, is we assume that the best way to do that is by talking. We assume that we can tell them everything that we know, and they'll be so impressed by our knowledge that they'll want to work with us. And that's wrong. It's flat out wrong. The thing that we have to do is we have to ask high quality questions, because good persuasion is all about understanding, deeply, truly understanding the problems, the fears, the concerns, the worries, the pains of the person across from us, understanding what they're looking for, and then guiding them to the best solution collaboratively. So my rule during discovery in our clinic and with our Audflow clients is, during discovery, we're only allowed to do 2 things. We're allowed to ask questions and rephrase what the patient just said, which is challenging, especially if you're a talker. I know a lot of audiologists that are talkers. We like to sit there and chat, and our patients are normally more than happy to do that with us. But the problem is, we make a friend, we don't have them move forward with treatment, right? So ask questions, rephrase patient statements. If you can do that during the discovery process, because think about what discovery, it's in the name, like we're trying to discover what's happening with this patient, right? So even if it's somebody that's in denial, rather than telling them, well, did you know that if you have untreated hearing loss, you're 2 to 5 times more likely to develop dementia, and throwing statistics at them? If somebody comes in and they're skeptical that they have a hearing problem, then we need to ask them a lot of questions. If they have a companion, the companion's complaining, but they feel like it's only the companion that's mumbling, then say, on one hand, I hear your spouse saying that she's really frustrated with your hearing, but then on the other hand, I hear you saying that there's no hearing problem at all. Where's the disconnect? I just want to understand what the disconnect is there. Let them talk, right? So we need to be able to synthesize everything that the patient brings to us and then relate that back to solutions. So another discovery kind of tactic or strategy that I have, or a tip that I would have for you, is I have two goals during discovery. If I can do these two things, I can move on. If I haven't done these two things, I can't move on yet. First, the patient has to verbalize that they have a hearing problem. Okay. They have to say it with their own words. They have to verbalize, even if it's, well, maybe in a really noisy restaurant, I have a hearing difficulty. Okay, that's fine. At least we've acknowledged that there is some situation. And I always come back to, like, even myself with normal hearing, there are situations where I don't hear perfectly. And so if a patient says I hear perfectly in every single situation, I'll say, well, I have normal hearing, and I feel like there are some really noisy situations where I have difficulty hearing with normal hearing. Have you ever experienced that? Well, yeah, I guess in noisy situations. Okay, at least we've acknowledged that there's something and we can be on the same team, right? Number two is that the patient has to agree to being open to treatment discussion if they have a hearing loss that's treatable. So I simply want them to acknowledge that if we find an aidable hearing loss, or if we find a treatable hearing loss, are you open to having a conversation about treatment solutions? They might say no, which is really good for you to know before we start trying to talk about treatment solutions, right? Because we want to address that objection before we get to it. So this is a lot of what we try to do in discovery, is we try to preempt the objections before they happen. And then we want to tie recommendations back to the patient goals. So during discovery, we have to find out where they want to hear better. And then we want to tie our treatment conversation back into their biggest challenges, because if we're making it about them and the problems that they're having, they're much more likely to want to move forward with treatment. So again, before we discuss treatment solutions, we have to have those two things. We have to have them verbalize that they're interested in pursuing treatment. So this typically will happen for me when we're demoing technology. We do a live demonstration of better hearing. While they're doing that, I want them to verbalize that they are in agreement with the recommendations. They want to move forward. Now it's just a question of finances, right? So we've asked questions strategically throughout the consultation to try to rule out any objections. And then finances are just logistics. We know that they like us, they trust us, they like the solution, they're in agreement, they want to do it. It's just figuring out the money. What I find is almost never do I get to this point and then people say, oh, well, that seems too expensive. It just doesn't happen because they now have so much trust in me and so much rapport with us that if they look at the whatever $6,000 treatment solution and it's truly too expensive, let's look at alternative options, right? Like, let's talk about unbundling. Let's talk about looking at different technology levels. That's fine. We want to get a treatment solution, but they're not just going to walk out the door and say, I need to think about it. We're going to work together to find a solution that works. And it's not persuasion. It's collaborative. We're working on the same team, right? So presenting your treatment plans, when we go to talk about treatment solutions, again, this is my opinion on how I think we should do it, especially in today's market. I think we need to focus on being our patient's guide and being collaborative rather than prescriptive. So I know I work with a manufacturer in my practice, and they train standard of care, which is their language for recommend premium for everybody. I just don't do that. Like, I'm strategic in the way that I present my treatment solutions, but I've had so many people come to me where I'm their second opinion, and they say, the last guy I went to just told me this one thing and it was $6,500, and it wasn't a conversation. He just said, that's what you need. And I wanted to be involved in the conversation. That's not how consumers behave anymore. Like, we have too much information as consumers to just agree with your one recommendation. And then finally, we need to focus on using simple language that relates back to the patient's needs and problems. So I'm just going to run through these. These are all examples. Instead of discussing noise reduction algorithms, talk about how the hearing aids will help them hear their friend better during their weekly lunch meeting. It's specific and it addresses that concern that they had. Instead of talking about bandwidth of devices, talk about how having a broader region of sound is more likely to stimulate the region of hearing where they have tinnitus, increasing the chance that they'll get tinnitus relief. So we're tying a feature back to how it benefits the patient. Instead of talking about channels, talk about how the technology can make the sound very clear and precise with their unique hearing profile so they can understand their grandchildren's voices. So notice the language that I use here is all layman's. I don't use technical language. And it's all, how can we creatively link the technology solution back to their problem and do that in a way that they get it, and it makes it where like they understand why premium hearing aids cost what they cost. They understand what they lose if they move to mid or entry level technology and how that relates back to their goals. So these are just some of the things that we teach inside of Audflow. If you want some more strategies like this about how to increase your sales conversion, your average sales price, and consistency between your providers, with Audflow is a patient presentation tool. So it's basically taking the entire hearing aid consultation and making it a patient-facing, fully customized for your practice sales presentation. It's beautiful. It looks really good. It's totally customized for you. In addition to that, we've got sales training one-on-one with me, pricing strategy. We do videos on the regular releasing strategies and tactics. We have scripting included, our consultation framework, and more. So if you want to learn more about Audflow and how it works and see what you could do to improve your hearing aid consultations, head over to audflow.com/systems. And that's where all of the stuff that we talk about today, we'll have links for all of the different tools and resources at that URL. So audflow.com/systems to learn more. And I'm going to kick it back over to Dusty.
All right. Thanks, Brad. So Brad's been talking about the beginning of the patient life cycle, and then the middle of the patient life cycle in terms of the fitting hearing aids is actually part of the rehabilitation process. But unfortunately, it's become for so many people the only part of the rehabilitation process that we work on. And so what I'm going to talk about is how beneficial it can be and how much value it adds to our patients if we provide a more comprehensive auditory rehabilitation program for our patients, because honestly, that is what's going to ensure that our patients are successful with their treatment in the long term. And so again, every hearing instrument specialist, every audiologist, every provider does the sensory management part. So the lower left-hand corner, sensory management, is what rehab has focused on more so lately. As our technology gets better and better, it takes more time. You know, we spend a lot of time not necessarily fitting the hearing aids, but then going into all of the accessories and the smartphone apps. And you guys know, we spend so much time helping our patients pair their hearing aids to their phones. So we're spending a lot of time on the technology side. And this is taking away time that used to be historically, when audiologists were rehabilitation specialists and we didn't even touch hearing aids, that time used to be spent on counseling, education, and training. But things have just changed. And so we've got to figure out how to make all this work. So the other parts of auditory rehab that we need to be focusing more on are the counseling parts, which is setting up realistic expectations for our patients, really showing them the importance of getting their family members involved in their treatment, managing their emotional reactions to it, Brad did a really good job with this, gathering what their goals and needs are and really focusing their treatment on that. But then also recognizing, acknowledging the emotional effects that the hearing loss is having, and then also providing a community for them. And then the educational parts of the rehab process are giving them communication strategies, environmental modifications, resources that they can tap into. And then auditory training is the kind of the fourth component of oral rehab. And that can be auditory training that's done on a computer that they do at home, things like LACE and Amplify, or it can be training that we do in the office. But the question really becomes, are we providing a holistic auditory rehabilitation program? Are we giving this value to our patients? And then the real question is, do our patients recognize it as such? That's what it really comes down to. And in the Market Track 8 survey, that was the last time that on a large scale, hearing aid users were asked a question about auditory rehab. So they asked these patients, did you receive oral rehab beyond hearing aids? And only 9% of experienced users and 18% of new users said that they did. And less than 5% of them reported receiving any kind of auditory training. So you can see that, number one, there's probably a disconnect, because I'm guessing that more providers actually did provide oral rehab beyond the hearing aids, but their patients just didn't recognize it as that. So they didn't answer yes to this question. But also, it's a huge opportunity for differentiation, because if only 9 to 18% of people are recognizing this from their provider, well, everybody else we can start providing this and showing patients this value, and that sets us apart from all the commodity options that are available out there. I know that there are challenges when it comes to providing comprehensive oral rehab. It's very, very common. I've met these challenges in my own practice, but the most commonly reported challenges are a lack of time, a lack of reimbursement, and a lack of compliance. And I would say that the compliance is a lack of compliance on the patient's part, but also lack of compliance on the provider part. So providers just aren't providing a consistent, comprehensive oral rehab program. And because I face these challenges in my own practice, I decided that there's got to be a way to overcome these challenges. And so I'm going to share a couple of tips with you on how I think we can do that. So the 5 keys was born out of these challenges, where I really felt like the education that we provided our patients needed to be simplified, and it needed to be systematized. Really, that's the answer. Simplification and systematization is the answer to really streamlining our processes. And so the way that I simplified the education was to create what I call the 5 keys. And this is just the information that we're already providing to our patients, but in a simplified, systematic form. So the 5 keys are the speaker, the listener, the environment, technology, and practice. So when I'm educating my patients, I do it in this, according to the 5 keys. And I always point out to them that the little red circle with the computer on it, which is technology, which is their hearing aids, is number 4. It's the 4th key, because those first 3 keys are more important. They're only going to get the best benefit from their hearing aids if they practice the speaker, the listener, and the environmental strategies that I teach them. The hearing aids can't do it all. So the speaker, the listener, and the environment are the patient taking responsibility for their own treatment. It's them buying into the process and doing their part to help themselves communicate better. And then the 5th key, the practice key, I always point out to my patients that you can learn these things, but until you do them over and over again, it's not going to become a habit. And so we have to practice it over and over for it to become a habit. And I'm talking about very simple things like choosing a booth when you go to a restaurant, things like that, the stuff that we might tell our patients, but if we're not real obvious in how we're explaining it to them, it might just go right over their heads, because they are so concentrated on the technology, which is understandable. They're learning so much in very few visits. And so a lot of the education and counseling that we provide for them is not retained. And so the 5 keys became a book and then handouts. So I found that the little handouts that I was giving my patients were not being read. And so I decided that it needed to be in a little bit more of a professional format. And so that's why I created the book. And then I had offered it to other people. So other practices started using the book as education. And patients seem to like it. They like the little dog, the pictures of the dog. It's systematic. But then I had practices tell me that, well, some of my patients won't actually read the whole book, so we'd like to have handouts. So we simplified it into a couple of different handouts. We call them speaker tips and the listener tips handouts. And it just takes the main points and simplifies them into a front and back easy handout, really inexpensive. In fact, there's actually a free version of this that you can download from my website. So really easy way to educate patients. And you can always learn more by contacting me if you want. Another tool that I've found was really helpful was in the needs assessment process. So Brad talked about how important it is to, like we said, get that patient's needs and goals. I found that some of the tools that were out there were good for some patients, maybe not as good for others. And so I kind of created my own needs assessment that goes along with the 5 keys. It can be used regardless of whether you're using the books or not. This is just an option for you, a tool that you can use if you find that it would be helpful. This needs assessment goes over various environments. It has them rate their level of difficulty, and then it has an area for them for you or them to put more detail about it. This is something that I've also had Counselor upload. So it's one of the questionnaires in Counselor. And if you want to get that version of it, just let me know and I'll give the okay to Counselor to pass that along to you. But this can be downloaded in my digital sample pack on my website if you wanted to use this tool. And then another tool that I created that is free for use for anybody is the Successful Communication Plan. So what I have found with oral rehab is that if our patients if they're only hearing it, they're not going to remember it. But if they have it in writing, then they're going to remember it. So this is just a little worksheet that allows you to kind of create a plan for them based on the 5 keys. Again, you don't need the books or any of the other materials to use this. And it puts in writing specific goals, which tells the patient and you as the provider exactly what they're going to do in their environment, what the speaker agrees to do, what the listener is going to do. Finally, we get to the technology piece. How are the hearing aids going to work? What program are they going to be in, whatnot, and how are they going to practice this? Very simple, doesn't have to be complicated. But I have found that this really helps my patients to be more compliant with the recommendations that I give them. So the next key in making things run a little bit more smoothly is to automate and differentiate ourselves. And so I wanted to take the 5 keys system and make it more automated. And this is something that actually came out of that retreat in Costa Rica, because the other people there were like, it should be digital. It should be digital. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this so much. So I had great brains putting their information in the pot, and the 5 Keys online communication training program was born. So it's hard to see on the screen because it's so small, but on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see an example of what an e-lesson looks like. So what I decided was that our patients do need education to be spread out over an amount of a period of time. So instead of getting it all in the first 30 days after they got their hearing aids, with the online program, they get little snippets of information, bite-sized snippets that come via email once a week for an entire year. So there's 52 lessons, and each lesson has a specific environment that it's educating on. It has one of the keys, a speaker, listener, technology, environment, and it gives a little homework assignment, and it gives a hearing aid tip, how to clean, what to do if there's feedback, all the stuff that we're educating our patients about. It just simplifies it for them in little bite-sized chunks. So it does include instruction, education, and counseling. There's optional worksheets embedded in it and optional additional training activities. There are links within the program to other consumer groups and programs, and it's fully branded to your practice. So you can see on the left-hand side, this is Brad's version. So your logo goes at the top, and then at the bottom, there's a closing box that has your photo and your unique closing message, a link to your review builder site. So this is where differentiation really comes into play. I really wanted my clinics that are using this to make it seem like it's coming from them, comes from your email address, replies go to your email address. So it's really differentiating your practice. So some of the consumer groups that are linked throughout the program are the other awesome programs that are out there, because what I've found is that there are most patients, I would say every patient needs the basics. They need to learn the 5 keys. They need to understand speaker, listener, environmental strategies, and they need to understand their hearing aids. But there's a smaller percentage of patients who want more. They really want to dig in. They want a community. They want extra resources. They want extra training. They're willing to put the time and money into being a really good consumer of all the things that are out there. And so that's why within the online program, there are buttons and links to these other programs, like the Hearing Wellness Journey that Don Hyman put together, like Amplify, which used to be the CLEAR program, LACE, Hearing Loss Association of America, Brain HQ, a lot of them. There's a lot of different resources that are in there. So for those uber motivated patients, they've got access to these things. And then I find that it's really important for clinics to know, what's going on with something that they're paying for. So we do monthly reporting. Every month you get a report that shows how many patients were enrolled that month, how many emails were sent out, what the open rate was, what the click rate was, and the unsubscribe rate. And then it has to be simple. So we made the enrollment really, really easy. If you have Counselor or Blueprint Solutions, it's integrated into both of those programs. If you don't have either of those office management systems, it's literally you put their name and their email address in and done. There's no usernames or passwords. So it's really easy to enroll. But what I think is probably the most exciting thing to me about this online program is that we can finally measure the compliance. So when it comes to any oral rehab program, if our patients aren't doing it, it's not really worth, putting that investment into. So luckily with an email delivery system, we're able to measure the compliance with open rate. So we assume that if the patient is opening the email, that they're reading it. And so open rate is something that's measured throughout the industry in the email world. And the average open rate of emails in general, the emails that you and I get, is 17%. So not great. In the medical community, the open rate is closer to 22%, so a little bit better. Compliance for LACE, for example, in 2010, Dr. Robert Sweeto and Jennifer Sabies did a study on compliance for LACE, and they found it was about 30%. So that's really the only kind of compliance number that we have for oral rehab programs right now. But the numbers that we've been getting for the 5 Keys online program have been hovering around 56%. And for I call them our best clinics, so the clinics that are really utilizing the program the most and having the best success with it, their open rate is around 70%. So I just like to show that because if you're going to invest in something, you want to invest in something your patients are actually going to do. And this has had some great results. So the ROI of 5 keys in your practice. Well, let me give the specifics here. So for the online program, it's $59 a month, or you can pay annually $599 a year. That saves you $109 over the course of a year. There is a one-time $200 setup fee for us to customize everything for you. And this pays for unlimited patient enrollments. So you can do the math. If you sign up 6 patients in a month, you're paying a little less than $10 a month for a comprehensive year-long oral rehab program. If you sign up more than that, which most of my clinics do, you're spending a lot less than that. So really, it does differentiate and add value, and it gives you educated, counseled patients. Those are happier patients, and those are the patients that are going to give you good reviews, referrals, and they're going to repurchase from you. So the ROI is really priceless for that. You can learn more about this, and there is actually a limited time discount associated with this webinar at audflow.com/systems. All right, Brad, back to you.
Cool. I have to say, as a Five Keys user, and I wanted to point out a statistic that you shared, which was, I think it was 5% of consumers reported that they had received oral rehabilitation.
Auditory
And
training.
it
Mm-hmm.
and your comment was that probably there were more providers doing that, but the patient just didn't realize that they were receiving it, which to me, that's such a light bulb because so much of what we do, I was just having a conversation with Chris about this earlier today. So much of what we do as audiologists, we really invest a lot of time and money and effort in providing really amazing experiences for patients. But if we don't communicate what we're doing to our patient, a lot of times they just assume that what we're doing is what everybody else would do. And
Mm-hmm.
so I always tell them when we're signing them up for Five Keys, or even when we're having a conversation about purchasing a hearing treatment plan, I mention Five Keys and I say, listen, hearing aids are part of the solution, but ultimately learning how to communicate with a hearing loss is about more than just hearing aids. And so we're going to be signing you up for this year-long program. And some people might even assign a value to that and then bundle that value into the cost of the hearing aids. You can make it a value add to where your patients actually value the emails coming in. And I had one lady like a week ago who came in and she had printed out all of her Five Keys emails and like highlighted and made notes. And she came in and wanted to talk to me about all of them. So I love seeing things like that. Anyway,
It was
I'm
one
a
of
big,
those small percentage
yeah,
people.
right.
Huh?
Yeah. That reads every single word of everything. Yeah.
Right.
But I'm a big advocate. And the other cool thing about Five Keys is thinking about open rates. Like a lot of the reason that marketing emails don't get opened is because we get habituated to everything that we receive from a company as a sales email. And so we aren't interested in buying anything from the company. So we just don't open their emails. But the cool thing about Five Keys is because we're consistently sending them value add emails with no calls to action, we're not asking them to buy anything or do anything. We're simply providing value. We're training our patients that when we send them emails, they're valuable. And so then 3 years from now, when their warranties are expiring and they need to come in and we want to let them try new technology, they're probably going to open that email because they're so used to what you send them being valuable. So on that point, let's talk about lifecycle engagement and marketing. And Five Keys is part of this system for me, but how do we automate a lot of those touch points during a patient life cycle so that we make sure they never fall through the cracks? So the fitting and beyond, after we fit a patient, what are the marketing campaigns that actually affect the practice? I know for me, when I was first building these systems out and there weren't like marketing integrations with Counselor yet, I was having to build a lot of these tools myself. And one of the challenges with that is like, you're going to be investing a lot of effort writing emails, coming up with, copywriting and timing. And it's a lot of work to build that stuff out. So it's like you're doing this analysis of what are going to be the things that actually have an impact on my practice's performance versus what's the stuff that's not really going to make much difference. And so for me, if you only did 3 campaigns, it would be these 3. Okay. And so this is for you. If you want to DIY this, you can. If you don't, I've done it for you. But after a new hearing aid purchase, this is one series of campaigns. You need your post-fit follow-up. This is like educational stuff. Five Keys could be that whole post-fit follow-up thing for you. I have additional that I do, but Five Keys by itself for that year is a really good post-fitting follow-up series. I recommend having an ambassador program and promoting that when somebody gets to the end of their trial period. Referral programs, review programs, messaging about those, making it like feel like membership, making it feel like they're part of the community rather than just asking them to send you referrals. Like you want to tie it back into their positive experience and give them the opportunity to share that positive experience with somebody else. And then we want to educate people on new technology. Again, I was talking to Chris today, and he was saying how he remembers back in the day when he used to work for a big chain. And this was like early 2000s. And they had a longtime patient who was wearing their hearing aids, and they came in and they had a second set of hearing aids that they had not purchased from Chris's clinic. And they were just in for a clean and check, wanted to get those cleaned too. And Chris asked like, hey, just out of curiosity, where did you get these hearing aids? And they're like, oh yeah, I went down to whatever, some clinic down the street, because they have these new open fit hearing aids with the receiver in the ear. Of course, Chris's clinic had that, but they hadn't communicated to the patients. For me, I feel like once a patient hits their 6 month with the devices, I'm telling them what the new things are that are out. I'm not pitching it, I'm not pushing it, but I'm just letting them know, hey, just so you know, this new portable charger came out. Or I know you had mentioned back when we started that you were interested in learning about wireless CIC devices. There are some of those that just came out from, you can tell them so that your patient knows that you're on top of everything, so that when the time comes for them, they talk to you, they don't get an ad in the mail and respond to the ad. End of service plan and end of warranty is your second series of campaigns. So I recommend doing an early upgrade campaign once somebody hits the end of their warranty. We offer a pretty significant trade-in value or trade-up value for devices when they hit the end of their trial. And then in-house warranties and service plans are really great ways to add revenue to your clinic, add value to your patient experience, and kind of keep your patients tied into your clinic because they've already paid to receive services from you. And then finally, tested, not treated. I think a lot of people get kind of hesitant to reach out to tested, not treated prospects too often. My take on that is they've already left your clinic without moving forward with treatment. Worst case scenario is the status quo continues and they don't move forward with treatment with you. And they either don't do anything or they go somewhere else, right? That's worst case scenario. Best case scenario is you have been hitting them with marketing messages often enough that the right message lands at the right time and they decide to come in and move forward, which in our clinic, we convert like 20% of our tested, not treated prospects into hearing aid patients in our practice, which industry average is 2%. We're 20%. So that's like a 6-figure top line revenue bump every year, just converting tested, not treated prospects. And it's because we've automated these follow-up promotions. We actually sign people up for 5 keys if they're tested, not treated too, which is another nice way to like value add, give value back to their life. You're continuing to provide value to them, even though they didn't pay you anything or move forward with anything. And again, they trust you so that when it is time, they're happy to come back to you. So what I've done is I've taken all of the marketing campaigns that I've built and I've customized them to work inside of Counselor, which is the OMS that I use. And then they also work inside of Blueprint. And then we've partnered with Blue Wing Direct Mail and created direct mail pieces that are also, they trigger based off of things that are happening inside of your patient database. So we can take all of these things like tested, not treated, extended service plans, loyalty programs, upgrade offers, lifecycle communications. We've taken all that stuff and automated it. So it just happens. So as long as your data is clean inside of your OMS, all of that marketing just happens for as long as they're a patient inside of your practice, which is like one of the most fundamental shifts in my practice in how much energy I had to spend managing my team. Like once I wasn't worried if we sent out our end of warranty letters or if we reached it out to those tested, not treateds, because all of it's automated. Once I didn't have to worry about that, that just freed up so much bandwidth in my mind to not have to worry. Plus our practice, like once we started automating this stuff, my practice is so much more consistent month to month in revenue. I can draw a direct correlation. So anyway, I am a huge advocate of automating your patient lifecycle marketing because your patients feel more connected to your practice and it makes a big difference in their experience. One other note, some people are hesitant about direct mail and that component of automation. This is my year to date. I've only sent 3,000 pieces, so $1,600. This is automated direct mail. So this is stuff to my current patients and to tested, not treated. So I spent $1,600. I didn't have to approve or send any of these mailers. They just went out automatically. And we've done $78,739 in sales. It's a 4,700% ROI. So that's pretty dang hard to beat. So if you're on the fence about automating direct mail or even sending direct mail in general, this is good evidence that it works. So to kind of wrap up, connection and differentiation happen all along the patient life cycle. So we have to start with a strong online presence, focus on your key differentiators. You need to have a pre-appointment system to begin building trust, proven and systematized and structured consultations and that process. Automated system to counsel and educate patients during the first year of hearing aid use, which 5 Keys, I think, is the tool to do. And then automated follow-up systems for both patients and prospects. So again, our focus is always going to be more on providing value and experience than price. And if your focus is on that, guess what? Your patients will be too. So I hope this has been valuable for you guys. We tried to really pack in a lot of actionable items, even if you don't move forward with any of the tools that we have. But head over to audflow.com/systems and just check out Dusty and my team's products. I think that they're genuinely things that I would not, and I know Dusty more so than me. I might be more inclined to sell stuff than Dusty, but Dusty wouldn't be selling anything if she didn't feel like it was going to have a way higher ROI than the price she's asking for. The same is true for me. Dusty's nicer than me though. Head over to audflow.com/systems and check out the products we have over there. And feel free, you can email me at brad@audflow.com. And Dusty, where should they contact you?
Yep, you can contact me at support@5keys.org if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer those. And I did just want to throw in one thing. I have not gotten to where I'm using Audflow yet. I'm excited to start using it, but I have been using the email automation program for probably a year now. And same thing, it has taken such a weight off of my shoulders to know that all of that is just happening behind the scenes. And sometimes it surprises me. A patient will come in and mention something. I'm like, how'd you know that? Oh yeah, I got an email, so
yeah.
So thank you for creating that. It's been so wonderful and so easy with the integration with counselors. So
Awesome.
So fun to collaborate and help each other out. So thank you.
It. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.